Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about the digestive system, both in monogastric and ruminant animals. So just to go over some basic digestive system anatomy, it includes the lips, the tongue, salivary glands, teeth, hard palate, soft palate, and the oropharynx. I have a picture here that kind of sums up a little bit of everything. It just kind of shows you where everything is. So the hard palate is right there. Is this hard bone piece that goes there. The soft palate is just behind that, right here. And actually the pharynx is located just below that, above the tonsils. And so then the esophagus, yeah, the esophagus is back here. It's actually behind the trachea. Most people think that the trachea is part of the esophagus, but it's actually not. Two separate tubes. And then we have the larynx here, which is called the throat. That's the opening to the trachea, and the epiglottis is actually this little flap of skin right here. So this kind of opens and closes when you need to breathe, or when you're eating, so that food doesn't go into the lungs and air doesn't go into your stomach. So that's basically that. There's this just cut out form of where the tongue is, and just this is the dorsal version of it. So there's that. A little more on the salivary glands. I couldn't find a really good visual aid for that, but there's a couple different ones. There's the parotoid salivary gland, which is near the ear, and that actually contains the parotoid duct, and that empties the saliva into the mouth. Then we go to the mandibular gland. It's ventral to the parotid, and it's caudal to the sublingual. And then the sublingual salivary glands are actually ventral to the parotid, and then they're rostral to the mandibular. So next we go to saliva. Saliva is actually pretty important. It's not just the stuff that lines their mouth. It's actually pretty important to, one, the digestion helps to digest part of the food, but it also contains enzymes, and it aids in the chemical digestion. It contains amylase and lipase. Amylase digests amylase, which is the sugar component of starch, and lipase is that digests the lipids. Saliva also neutralizes the acidic environment of the stomach, so that, I also believe it helps lubricate the trachea, so that it's easier for the food to move down. Because you have these rings also here that help move the food down, but I think the saliva aids in that also. To dive more into the esophagus anatomy. I have another picture for you. So there's this picture. This kind of just shows you the overall, kind of the whole digestive system. But this is where the larynx is here, and then you can see how that connects to the trachea here. And then the esophagus is right behind that. But you can see how they both kind of go here, and then they kind of merge. Well, actually, the trachea is going into the stomach. Which is actually back behind the heart, and then the esophagus leads to the lungs. So that just kind of shows you where they lead to. Let's see. So what the esophagus does is it connects the pharynx to the stomach. This is transport only, so there's actually no digestion involved in this. Dorsal to the trachea. So it's right behind it, and there are no rings to keep it open, so it's more of it's just a long tube. Unlike the trachea, where, like I said before, it has rings to it, the esophagus is just a big, long, elastic tube, and that enters the stomach. There's actually a cardiac sphincter in the stomach that prevents the reflux, so it prevents anything coming back up through the esophagus and possibly damaging it. There's a part of the digestive system which is called the omentum. It's a tissue that covers the abdominal organs. It's kind of it's a gray tissue that is actually acts like a band-aid. So if there's anything that is cut or damaged in the abdominal organ area, people can actually go into the vets can actually go inside and use part of the omentum and cover that part of the injured organ, and it'll actually heal it up really well without having any kind of extra issues with that. So the monogastric stomach, it includes a couple different parts to it. Should I get to my picture here? So the normal stomach, look at that. There's a couple different parts of it. It's not just a big piece of tissue that most people kind of think of it as, but actually it actually includes parts called the cardia, the fundus, body, pyloric antrum, and the pylorus, and they all kind of do different kind of things. So the cardia is the cardiac sphincter, and the fundus expands as food enters, and that contains the gastric glands. The body also expands as food enters, and that also contains gastric glands. The pyloric antrum grinds up the food and regulates hydrochloric acid, which contains G cells that produce the gastrin. So this is the stuff that is actually pretty dangerous if you mess with it. But that's also what makes the stomach so amazing, is that it can actually contain hydrochloric acid, and because of the lining of the stomach, it actually doesn't burn itself, and we don't die. And the pylorus is a muscular sphincter that regulates the movement of the chyme, which is another word for the digested food, into the small intestine and prevents backflow. So the stomach, this is a less like labeled version of it, but it gives you an idea of what it is. So this is the esophagus. Then you go to the fundus up here. The cardiac sphincter is actually right in between here. This is also called, this part right in between here is called the lesser curvature, and then this part that's all the way around here is also called the greater curvature. The body is here, so this is where the majority of the food is. And then, let's see, the omentum is not. Oh yeah, that's the omentum attached to the stomach there. That pyloric atrium is right here, and then the pylorus is actually here, and that leads to the small intestine. So this is where the place where it grinds up the food and regulates the hydrochloric acid. The hydrochloric acid is more of up in the body area. Yeah, and so then this little area here actually prevents the backflow, and this regulates the movement of the food into the small intestine. So there's that one. So now we're going to move on to the ruminant stomach. The ruminant stomach is a little bit more. It's a little more different. It's not as complicated, but it involves a reticulum, a rumen, an omasum, and abomasum. And then, so for this one, I have a picture here. A little closer. Have your book. Ooh. So here it's a lot more, it's definitely a lot more large, but the omasum is right up here, abomasum is down here, the rumen is this part right here and up here, and then that's the small intestine, so that'll just go back to the larger system. The reticulum is right up here. So the digestive system of like a cow versus a dog is actually very different, and they each do a lot more different things. The reticulum is honeycomb shape. It's also called like the honeycomb. It's the lining to increase the surface area. It collects the large feed particles to make sure that they are digested more before entering the next section. The rumen is the fermentation vat that processes materials into usable energy. Let's see. And the omasum is the entrance off the reticulum, and it filters and absorbs the water that the animal consumes. And then abomasum is the true stomach. This is the actual like stomach that people always talk about. Helps break down the microbial protein and undigestible intake protein to become more absorbed by the intestine. So in this book, it also shows you a picture of what reticulum, rumen, and those things actually look like. So it's actually really interesting. So here, you can see how the rumen is over here. The reticulum, oh dear. The reticulum is definitely honeycomb shaped. Oh my goodness. There we go. See with the bigger crevices, the bigger holes in here, that's where the large food particles get caught. And then we have the, I believe, the omasum. Yes, the omasum and then the abomasum. So this is the true stomach part here. This helps break down the microbial protein. And then the omasum is here, and this actually filters and absorbs the water. So, and this kind of shows you where all of it lays in the actual animal. So I thought that was actually really cool. So yeah, so then after it goes through the stomach, it goes through the small intestine, which also has a couple different parts to it. I won't get into huge detail about it, but the three parts are the duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum. And then after that, it goes into the large intestine, which contains the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. And the large intestine actually recovers fluids and electrolytes and actually stores fluids. The colon is actually where it stores the feces. And so then it comes to the rectum and the anus. The rectum is the terminal part of the large intestine. It contains a lot of glands and sensory receptors to detect stretching and initiate defecation. The anus is two sphincters, and it controls the passing of feces. So from the mouth all the way to the anus, it's actually really interesting. And I had one more. Here it is. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.